and welcome to our SAC family and friends. Today's coalition is so glad that you've joined us for our Southern HIV/AIDS Awareness Day. On behalf of SAC's Board of Directors, we want to profusely thank our generous sponsors, without whom this event would not be possible. Our theme this year is Pursuing the Possible, Doing the Work. I've been around long enough to know that the HIV community has been pursuing the seemingly impossible for decades, and with a great deal of dedication and success. We do the work that is necessary to create change. We have many sheroes and heroes, from Ryan and Jeannie White to Elizabeth Taylor to Elton John, from Phil Wilson to Mary Bowman. HIV advocates always led the way to change, and we will continue to do so, even during a pandemic. We know the issues in the South. We are the epicenter of the HIV epidemic. Southern states account for 52% of all new cases. We have the highest mortality rates. We have less resources to fight the epidemic with. And we all know that African Americans are disproportionately impacted by HIV in every single category. If the COVID-19 epidemic has shown us anything, it has shown us the ugly underbelly of America that leaves Black and Brown Americans more exposed and less protected. Black Americans are dying at twice the rate of white Americans, not for biological reasons, but because of the systemic and deep-rooted inequities and racism that we have all been living with for hundreds of years. So please join us again tomorrow when we'll be focusing on solutions. We have a lot of challenges, but I do believe that we are up to the task. Don't forget to see how you can be involved at southernsolutions.org. Thanks again for all that you do. As my staff likes to say, teamwork makes the dream work. And we are dreaming of a future without stigma, without racism, without inequity, and without HIV. So you guys stay safe out there and wear your masks.
Good afternoon. Good morning.
Hey there.
The dandelion in the midst of rose bushes would stick out like a sore thumb to ignorant souls. But I know the road this dandelion endured. This weed that all gardeners want to destroy is more appreciated by God than any seemingly beautiful bush of roses. Though that misunderstood dandelion won't for long last, let it be known that God gave it the role of the outcast for divine importance, and that all-knowing God created dandelions with the strength to withstand ignorance and hatred. Dandelions live in this matrix of life, understanding the price. Roses live like the world was handed. Dandelions take the world and won't leave a rose stranded.
So, good morning. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Tony Christon-Walker, and I am the Director of Prevention and Community Partnerships for AIDS Alabama. And I am delighted to facilitate a conversation this morning with some activists. But before we do that, I do want to pay homage to the people that we saw in the video that just came through. For those of you like me who knew about the AIDS epidemic when it first happened, we were losing that many people a day. Sometimes, in a half day, we would double that. And because of advances and medications and just some other things that happen, people like us, like everybody on the screen, you see, we're all living with HIV and we're not afraid of dying tomorrow because that's just not the way that works or the way that it should work because it still happens. But again, I want to tell you that I'm glad that we're having this conversation. Because there are a lot of people who live in the South who are living with HIV. And these beautiful people that are going to join me are some of those people, and they're going to tell their stories. And I like the fact that we're framing this around a lens. A lot of people see a finished picture and they don't realize all the things that go into making that picture what it is. You have to worry about the shutter speed. You have to worry about the ISO. There are so many components to creating a picture and making a beautiful picture. There's an old adage that says a picture is worth 1,000 words. And I promise you're going to hear more than 1,000 words from our guests today, and not me, but from them. When we look at photos, sometimes the images are in sharp focus because of the depth of field or f-stop. When you blur the backgrounds on pictures, that's one of those shallow depth of field things that we talked about. And sometimes we see images and everything in it is in focus. Everything's exposed. You can see all the details of everything that you see in the pictures. And then sometimes we see pictures and they may be blurred a little bit. Like if you've ever seen a picture of a brook and the water looks white and the grass is green, it's because the grass isn't moving, the water is, so it looks a little blurred. And that's how we kind of tell our stories. We tell our stories in ways that make us feel comfortable. And sometimes we want to be the focus. Sometimes we want to be in the background. And sometimes we want to be that little blurred thing. And sometimes you can hide things in the blurs. There's a new thing called Photoshop, been out about 20 years. And the next photo we're going to see is when I tell you that you can't believe your lying eyes, because sometimes you will see things that are not there. I'm not a quintuplet. I'm not part of a quintuplet. All those pictures are me. And sometimes people can manipulate things and they can manipulate your story. And we're going to tell our own stories today. So without further ado, I want to go ahead and start introducing our panelists. First, we have Miss Arya Lester. Arya?
Hello, Tony. Hello, everyone.
Next, we have Quintara Lane. She's just going to wave. Okay, you can wave. And,
Hi.
and Mr. Sean Black. Sean?
There, Tony. Hey, Tony. Hey, Arya, Quintara. It's good to be here. Good to see your faces.
Good to see you, man. And thank you for these pictures that these images, beautiful images we're gonna show. So I'm gonna start off with Arya. And the picture that we're gonna show of you, you told me that when you first got your HIV diagnosis, that everything was like really, really public. A lot of us have the privilege of telling our own story or deciding when it comes out. You said that your story was like public. Tell our audience what that looks like, what that felt like to you.
Well, I think it's a story of stigma. When I first got diagnosed, I was already an HIV advocate. So just being a Black woman of transgender experience, HIV was just a natural part of our everyday lives. From the 90s when I first transitioned in New York, and just seeing a lot of my sisters and brothers just succumb to it. It was something that was always in the back of your mind and always in the whispered conversations and the secret visits to get tested. And from that, I kind of got into advocacy and education when it comes to our lived lives. And when I lived in Florida, Miami Beach to be exact, I even went as far up as managing a counseling and testing center for South Beach for testing for HIV. And during that time, being a trans woman, I also dealt with a lot of things outside of being educated about HIV that led to me being homeless, being in a situation to where I was in an environment in space to where I didn't have the protections that most people do, that led to a sexual assault to where I did acquire HIV. And so being an advocate already, like first off, being a trans advocate, people automatically assume that if you worked in HIV, you were positive. And for a long time, I've kind of dealt with it and that type of stigma, but then to actually become positive myself, even after knowing everything and doing all the precautions that I knew was possible, to come down with it, attached a big stigma personally on myself that I put on myself, that I let myself down as a leader in the movement. And I dealt with that kind of secretly and just with maybe a handful of people for a little while until, I wanted to take control of it, and I wanted to take control of my emotions and the way that I feel and see myself. And with the support of so many people, I see Vicky, Ariana, I love you all too. Um, I decided to just kind of tell my story publicly to everyone at once. And so,
Let me interrupt you for a second. So, you, when people think they have something on you, they love kind of holding it over you. And I remember there were times in my life when people have like literally used my HIV status as a weapon against me. And there was a saying that I always say, you can only tell it once, but I can tell it better. And so when you talk about taking control of your story, tell me how you took control. What was the steps that you used to take control of your story and how it was told?
well, in talking about art, one thing I did was I started writing. And I started writing about my situation and what led me to that situation in the type of way that I like to express myself, which is through writing. And so I wrote a blog, and it was kind of a story that embodied everything that I went through with my diagnosis and just the situation and experience of itself. And through that way, through the Well Project, I actually put out a blog through A Girl Like Me. And with that, I told my story to the world at once, to countries all across, the earth. And that's how, I kind of, and from that, I got attached to certain organizations like Ariana Center and the Transgender Law Center. And that's where this picture comes up. It was during a time where, I was still in that same situation that led to my diagnosis, but I was unwilling to let that kind of hold and shackle me.
Right.
And yeah, so this is very symbolic of it, the brick wall in of itself, symbolizing both stability and non-access at the same
Right.
time. That just represents a lot of what I was going through at that time.
That's a great analogy of that picture. So we're gonna move to our next picture that I also love. So like when you're in public view, especially if something about you that is private becomes public, again, people try to use that against you, but there are going to be those allies. I remember with my own story, when I first came out about my HIV status, I came out in the Birmingham News. This reporter did a story on me, and about 6 o'clock in the morning, I got all these phone calls. And one of my friends, I'm gonna call her out. She's probably watching. Her name is Chantel Mosley Burns. She called me like, Tony Walker, I can't believe you didn't tell me you had HIV. I'm like, oh my God, like what kind of, what is this about? She goes, you've been living with that by yourself, and we could have helped you. And I was like, oh, because there are people who want to help. So, like when you have things like this that happen to you, like this picture I love because you found allies, you found support. Maslow's hierarchy of needs say that our basic need is like safety, and you find safety in friends. Tell me about this image here.
Well, I mean, this image just means a lot to me. I was struggling a lot during that time. And like, for example, Ariana Lynch, that's over on the far left, is a trans Latina from Peru that was one of the first, like, just openly HIV positive trans people that I knew that didn't stop or allow that to really dim her light. And that empowered me. And then being around other trans women that, were finding their own empowerment even through the, being HIV positive and through all the things that we deal with homelessness and unemployment and underemployment and not having access to health care, and just to kind of know that you're not alone going through that.
Right.
It gave a little something that I still hold to this very day.
It's a beautiful image, and we do need our friends and all of our allies, which which is I love. So as we transition and we get a little bit more comfortable, there was a time when I know for me, I was ashamed to tell people I was HIV positive, just because of the level of stigma that's attached to it. People make judgments about your life, and somehow or another, this is your fault and you deserved it. But once you're able to like reconcile that pain, you kind of find ways to kind of like accept and celebrate. And like you just kind of like took everybody out in this picture right here. There are 4 women up here, but you are definitely the star of this picture. Tell me about how you celebrate and how you like move forward, with this going forward.
Well, I mean, one is just realizing that so many things that we deal with, not one thing defines us, and we're so layered by so many things, negative and positive, that we can't allow something, that's just 3 letters to really take full control over how we see ourselves. And learning about disclosure and learning that being openly HIV positive doesn't mean that you're just telling each and everybody and spreading it across the world. It's being okay when you're in a situation that you're able to disclose, and being okay to do that without judging yourself. And once I really learned that, I think is when I got that exhilarating freedom that you kind of see here in this picture, and realizing that in and of itself doesn't define me, and being open about it also doesn't define me, and that we get to pick and choose of when we really want to tell our stories. Like on this platform today for this day of awareness, it was just a natural time for me to kind of, put myself out there and tell my story and let people know that, it's not as bad as how we portray it to ourselves.
Yeah. No matter what our levels of marginalization or no matter what identities that we hold, a lot of times people think that just because you're HIV positive or just because you're a woman of trans experience, that those are the only things that you can talk about. And it's called the normalization of the majority. So what the majority population does is normal. Everything else that anybody else does is somehow special or like just something extra added. It's not really that important to the story. And I thought about that one day. I was watching CNN and they had this panel of 8 people on this dais and they were talking about something political. And there were 8 white people up there. And I was like, oh, okay. Oh my God, you mean to tell me they couldn't find out one person of color to be in this group? And it's because, whiteness is normalized in our country. And I'm like, you know what? If we had 8 Black people out there, they would swear we're only talking about Black issues. Like, because of whatever our marginalization level is, that's all that we can talk about. And we're so much more than our HIV diagnosis. We're so much more than being Black. We're so much more than our sexual identification. We are people just like everybody else. And that makes us all normal. So once you have like moved from like that autofocus I was talking about with the cameras, you kind of control your light and you know where the shadows are, you know where the light spots are, you know where the dark spots are. And then you like turn that pain into activism. And just because you live with HIV or just because you're trans or just because you're Black, you don't have to be an activist, So like, tell me about your journey into activism.
One thing that I learned that kind of this picture kind of showcases is, you see the focus on me and not so much on the background. And it's realizing first you get into it because now you're passionate. Now I'm like, I'm okay with my diagnosis. I want to help other people. And you get into it, but sometimes we lose ourselves in activism and advocacy, and we don't apply harm reduction and trauma informed care to our own trajectory as people. And
Right.
so I think that one of the biggest things learning is that you have to control your spaces, control your narrative, control of where you're going to put in your emotional labor. You know, you don't have to tell your story on every platform or say yes to every request to kind of pull up some of that trauma that may be attached to your diagnosis. And once you find those right ways and times and moments for you to really tell your story to make the most impact, is when you become a successful activist and an advocate that is still going to deal with a lot of stuff, but you're less likely to deal with that burnout when you do still focus on yourself and don't put yourself 100% into any movement, because you need to have some type of focus on you in order to continue in it.
So, when you become an activist or advocate, you kind of like put yourself out in public spaces. And I remember back when I first started doing this, I was just comfortable with telling my own story. Somebody thought that they could tell my story for me, and they did this Facebook post, and like, shout out to all my HIV positive friends doing big stuff in Baltimore. Tony's back in Florida doing big stuff, and I was like, sis. Like, why are you tagging me in this? And it was one of those things where I wasn't embarrassed, I wasn't ashamed, but that person was not a person who I trusted enough with my story to allow them to take the lead. And the next photo is like you like being in the background. And I think all of us have gone through that phase where someone feels like just because I told you I'm positive, then you get to tell everybody. And you absolutely do not. We still get to choose when we tell our stories, where we tell our stories, even when we become public figures. So like this, I love this photo because the depth of field have you and this other young lady like very focused, and then the background is kind of blurred a little bit. So it's like the rest of it really doesn't matter. What's important is the relationship between these two people. Could you talk a little bit about this photo for me?
Yeah, I mean, this is the woman that I talked about that was, my example for being an open advocate for trans women living with HIV. And, you don't have to hold it all on your own at the same time, and you can share the load. This moment was so much easier on Capitol Hill to really, you know, talk about what we were passionate about and what we feel that people need to support in order to help our lives, be as easy as every other citizen should be. And sometimes it's together, that you really find that strength and the bravery. Advocacy and activism, it takes some type of bravery. I try to steer away from strong and resiliency when we talk about especially like Black women, but when we're talking about HIV, it does take strength in order to really share your story. And yes, share the load as a
It absolutely does, my sister. Before I move on to Quintara, this is the first time I'm doing this, so I'm kind of rusty. But tell us a little, where are you from? Like, tell us where you're from. Tell us what you do in your city. Give me about a good minute, and then we'll move on.
Yeah. I'm from everywhere, really. So I was born in New York. That's where I first transitioned in the late 90s, too, and dealt with a lot of things. I also lived my teens in New York. I mean, not in New York, in Georgia, that is. And that's in a small town, Georgia, 20,000 people in the whole county. So I did the rural black belt, white belt, type of area. And then I lived in Miami for 13 years. But currently, I am in DC. I am the deputy director of the Transgender Strategy Center. And I just love the narrative that Sean's photos really kind of capture certain points of my story that just falls in line into just encouraging other people to just continue, keep pushing. I was there, and now I'm here in a place that I'm able to tell my story, to live in somewhat comfort, and yeah, and to be healthy and free.
Thank you so much for being transparent and vulnerable with us today. I shade my sister. So next we have Miss Quintara Lane. Quintara, so tell us a little bit about yourself since I messed up with the ride. Tell us a little bit like where you from, and like just something like whimsical about yourself.
First, if I may, I definitely want to thank Arya for being so transparent and sharing her story. This is my first time meeting her this week and throughout this experience that is so grateful that I am so grateful to be on and to be a part of. I'm all just hearing your story, like so much similarities. I am Quintara Lane, also known as Lady Queen Lane to my Miami, Florida residents. I was born and raised in Miami, Florida, where I am a 33-year survivor of HIV. So when we talk about long-term surviving and the homage we paid to the ones who passed away, I lived through that. I lived through the era of taking up to 32 medications a day. I lived through the era of just seeing my mom pass away and her body deteriorate, and so many other friends that passed away. So I do understand and can really relate to the idea of surviving and having this art created towards HIV.
Okay, so I'm. This is like not even on my script right now because I'm always the old person in the group now since I'm 53. But Araya coming up in the 90s, you talking about being a 33-year survivor. Y'all a lot older than I thought y'all are. I'm just gonna say that. And we know black don't crack. It get a little extra sometimes, but we know that black don't crack.
Yes.
So, so tell us a little bit about your HIV journey, and then we'll go into the first photo. Like, like when were you diagnosed, and we'll go from there.
Okay, so I recall I was diagnosed like around the age of 3 or 2. I have 3 other sisters. I have a Irish sister, which we are 11 months apart, and I have the virus. She don't. So I grew up in a household where I was literally the only one with HIV because my mom wasn't in the house with us. My grandmother raised us. At that time, it was a lot of like unknown. I don't know why I'm taking these medications and my sister not taking medication. I don't know why I'm getting sick and my sister is not getting sick. I don't know why I have to go to the doctor continuously and my sister is not. So it was a lot of those questions and resentment towards it. But then it was a lot of like shelter. I was sheltered a lot because I was sick. So I wasn't exposed to as much as my sister, but I was definitely sheltered because I was always sick. I used to have jaundice where my eyelids turned yellow. When taking Bactrim, I couldn't be in the sun. I had to drink medication. I had to take food and drink lots of water with my medication. And this was in the 90s where you was taking medication around the clock. So you are in school taking medication. And back then, teachers didn't allow you to have snacks and stuff in the classroom. But because I had to take medication, I was exempt. So now I'm targeted as being bullied in school because I was the teacher pet, not knowing that I had to go through these different things to make sure I'm healthy. So it was a lot of different things that occurred. Fast forward my teenage year, I decided to come out about my HIV status. Well, for one, I found out I was HIV positive when I was about 9 years old because I was asking so many questions. I wanted to know what was going on. By this time, I was a patient of the University of Miami Pediatric Department at the Middle School of Medicine. And when they told us, they placed us in a support group. The support group had about 800 other people similar to me that was either born with HIV perinatally or also acquired it through other ways. And just being able to see someone that looks like me and can share the experience of me, seeing where there was a family of 6 boys and every other boy had HIV. So that gave me hope because it's like, okay, I'm not alone. Okay, I can do this. But then in the 90s, late 90s, all my friends start passing away. So we had this great big support group of like, again, 500 or so. Now we're down to like 37 of us remaining. So when you talk about the idea of like surviving with HIV and making sure you stay on medication, because I have not always stayed on medication. I'm resistant towards a lot of medication, and that just means when you take the HIV medicine, it's not working for your body anymore. So you have to come up with a new regimen. I advocated for the idea of having lesser pills. So when it came down to the cocktail regimen, I remember sitting on a board with the scientists and just pouring out all my medicine and explaining to them, hey, I can't do this anymore. I'm tired of taking 6 pills plus some twice a day. I can't do this. Like, you have to come up with something else. And that's when scientists created the cocktail regimen, where it came out where you only had to take 1 pill once a day, which is great. But I don't qualify for that because I have went through all these different medications to where I built a resistance towards it. So it's great that those things are out there. It's great that I was able to stand up and just like share my experience and share like what's going on inside my body. I've always participated with research, with the NIH research and other research at the University of Miami or things that go around, because I want to know what's going on. I want to know internally. I want to know what's going on inside my body that I can't see.
Right.
And be the first one to like, hey, are there new options out there? Because this may be not working or something else. So it's a very 33 years of this virus. Again, fast forward even more. When I first told my high school friends, and that's just leading into the picture. So,
Oh yeah,
when
I know. I
yeah,
tell her.
yeah. So fast forward, I am now a mother of 2. I am living in Virginia, where it just a lot of things are transitioning, and I am loving the lanes that I'm in.
So I had a conversation with a friend of mine yesterday, and we were
Mhm.
talking about HIV testing in schools. And I've been doing this work for 7 years, and some of the saddest situations I've had were kids who were perinatally infected who didn't know it. So, like you as a child going to the doctor all the time, and not knowing why. I know I've had kids who were like in their 20s and they're just finding out, and that does a lot to your psyche.
It does, and that's why I became an HIV advocate. Once I graduated high school, I became the research assistant. Well, actually, an HIV tester at the University of Miami, and then I transferred. I got a raise and went towards the research part. But one of my first patients who were diagnosed, they already knew. Well, they didn't know that they was HIV positive, but they was perinatally infected. I find that to be so like dishonest and just hurtful towards a teenager, because imagine if you're in high school, elementary school, kids are having sex in elementary school. So imagine these kids who are HIV positive that do not know their status, who are perinatally infected, but yet they're having sex. Then where do we go from there?
Yeah,
So that's
and the parents don't realize that their internalized shame and stigma, which prevents them to telling the kids that they're the reason that they're HIV positive, actually puts not only their kids but other kids at risk too.
mhm,
So the conversation we had, like in the state of Alabama, if you're 13 years old, you can have an HIV test, and your parent don't know, they won't get the results. When my husband and I were taking my son to his pediatrician when he turned 13, they're like, "Well, Dad, y'all can't come in."
right.
Because there are things that they need to talk about that we may not need to hear. So that's one of the reasons why I'm really an advocate for HIV testing, especially for kids, because there are some kids who need to know their status that their parents just haven't told them. And I understand it because of the disclosure, but it's still kind of selfish when you think about the way it affects your children. I just
Right.
wish more people could see people like us living well with this and be able to be honest with their kids. So we're gonna go into the first picture. So like, no matter how we're currently dealing with our HIV status, we have those moments, those days, sometimes years in which we're not okay. So tell me about the times like early on when you weren't okay. This picture is black and white, and the black and white picture. Sometimes you can see everything, sometimes you can't. What are we not seeing in this picture? Like, where is Quintara Lane in this picture?
That was all Quintara Lane, because the Lady Queen Lane is presented in front of you right now. That is all Quintara Lane. And I say that because at a time of my life with that picture, I was I felt like I was isolated. I felt like I was alone, even though I was this advocate and I was traveling and I was like doing different things to help the community and to be there for everybody else. I'm at home right now in my apartment by myself. Well, with Sean, who's taking a picture. But at the same token, I'm by myself. And I just feel like at that age, like so many of my friends was having kids. There was other friends that was getting married. My younger sister was married at the time. And it was just so much going on that I was like, well, when will it be my turn? And because I have the first person I ever disclosed I was HIV positive to, well, when I was dating, pulled out a gun on me. Yes, and told me to get out his car because of the stigma. So I've always dated, but once I disclosed that part to them about my HIV status, it was like, oh, I can't deal with you, or oh, I want to live, or it just things that come out of their mouth that don't have any filters. And I'm like, okay, well, I still have feelings. I'm still a human being. So this picture displays those emotions. This picture displays like the isolation I felt, the depression I was going through. It displayed like so much that's coming up right now as I like feel it. Right? So yes.
Once I became once I got okay with my status, I remember that I decided that before I dated anybody, like even go out on the first date, I'm gonna tell him my HIV status. And the reason why I did that, I was dating this guy, and I was like, Tony, slow down a little bit. You ain't gotta sleep with everybody, and just get to know this guy. So this guy I was getting to know. He wanted to have sex. I'm like, no, we need to wait. And so when I finally got in my mind, okay, we're going to do this. I'm like, before we do this, I need to tell you something. And when I told him, he didn't pull out a gun on me, but he kind of pulled out an emotional gun of sorts. He started crying and just inconsolable, like I was going to die that moment. But right after that, he started doing things to purposely piss me off to where I would break up with him because I don't care what you think about me. I'm not going to take your crap. So there's a point when enough is enough and too much stinks. And so that taught me then, before I get my emotions, and this is me, it works for me, before I got my emotions tied up, I need to make sure that you're going to be around or you're worth me even telling. Because if I tell you and you leave, then we're not working anyway, and we've all gone through that on some levels, I think.
Well, I definitely appreciate that because that's the strength and the courage that I built up too. Just being able to say, I'm okay with my status. And if you don't like me or not, then I'm still going to move forward and continue pushing. So there was this song that everyone that I lose, I bounce back with too. It's like an Atlanta rap song that I used to use as my mantra. So regardless of if a person was to leave me, I had two more waiting. And that wasn't really good at the moment either. Again, depression and just isolation. But it helped comfort, in a sense, in the wrong comforts. So at the end of the day, it's like that picture itself just displays Quintara Lane dealing with depression, dealing with isolation, just dealing with the sadness and just wanting a family and just wanting to be loved.
Right. So the next picture we're going to show, on a camera, there's something called an ISO setting, and it really controls the amount of light that the sensor absorbs. It shows your light. You can make the photos darker or lighter depending on how much light you let in. But sometimes the light is not all that bright, and sometimes we have to try to figure out how to find our light. What was the thing that got you into finding your light to where you can wear this shirt that says I have HIV and deal with yourself on that level?
Well, this was actually the second street scare that I ever attended. This shirt was created by RCP Movement, Respect Yourself, Check Yourself, and Protect Yourself. And they were attending and doing, that I was affiliated with, doing a lot of street scares and just bringing awareness to our community. One of the reasons why this is so bright and why I am so excited was because I was the one who actually wanted to do it somewhere close to home. So I was on 27th Avenue and 178th Street, now known as Miami Gardens, right across from the stadium, Hard Rock Stadium it's called now. I was right there, right in front of that McDonald's. And I wanted to be there because it's the most busiest street in South Florida. And it is the most well-known street for anybody or everybody who knows me. they're going to know today that I have HIV. So I kind of stood a ground to say that I am here and I'm not going anywhere, and I'm going to become the face of HIV because our community needs help. At the end of the day, there's too many people dying, and we want to talk about it in a wrong way. So let's do something about it in a collective way. So I was able to bring some people together and just create an environment of just protection. We had a testing van out there, and I was just in awe that this was actually happening on my block, because we never had anything like this. Everything will be out like further in the Liberty City area, or further like in Broward area, or even on South Beach. But there was nothing right there in my hometown, where it's still like the highest risk factor of newly infected HIV cases. And this was like in 2011, 12.
Yeah.
Yes. So it's just a light to say that, hey, I'm helping, I'm doing something positive, and regardless of whatever you may think about me, I'm going to be here, and there's nothing else you can do about it. I'm living.
I'm living. I'm living. So like when I got my diagnosis, you know, people were dying. Like I was like in the night, people were just dying, like just rampantly dying. And, you know, because of that, it kind of makes you afraid to reach out to people. And one of the groups of people that the last group that I reached out to was my family. Like my family didn't find out that I was HIV positive until about 7 years ago when I started working here. And it wasn't that I didn't think that my family loved me. It was like I didn't want to be a burden to them. You know, your story is a little different because you were pretty much born with HIV. So tell me about the support that you got from your beautiful grandma. Like I just love this next picture. And then I think there's another with you, your nephew, that just really like resonates for me.
Well, my grandmother is definitely my life. She's my light that just shines. She instilled in me faith, that God is a healer and God is a provider. Most importantly, God is a healer. And with that confidence that she instilled in me at a young age, in reference to having your strength and your belief, it allowed me to move forward, and it even moved like thousands of miles away. The picture, it paid homage to her because of her strength, because of her sacrifice she made, not only to raise her grandkids, her great grand, she has like 5 generations, and she continued to raise kids. That's what grandmas do. But I love the fight in her, that she continued to push forward. She's still alive to this day. She's 83 years old young, because she is, as you say,
She's
black don't
absolutely
crack.
gorgeous. She's absolutely
Right,
beautiful.
yes, right there. She's about 72. So yes, but she's definitely my world. And she does support me in different events that I do. She definitely came up here to support me in Virginia. And she just, if you know Grandma Lane, she don't play. She definitely don't play. One of the memories I recall was when I had shingles. So I just got over chickenpox, but I had shingles at a very young age. And anybody who ever had shingles know that is the worst experience ever. And I remember her arguing with my doctor and like telling him to shut up. She was like, "What do you think? I'm going to sit there and let my baby suffer?" Like, she's just feisty. She is one of those people that does not take any answer. Like, she wants to know something else, or she wants to do something else. She's not going to sit there and take anything. And I think that's where I get my strength from. And I'm so like, so how you say it, stubborn,
Right.
and rebellious in a sense, to where I'm not going to sit here and let anybody talk negative in my life, speak any negativity in my life. I'm not going to let the doctors, like, they are doctors and we do respect them, but we know our body. So if something's not going right, we have to stand up for ourselves, and we have to be willing to say, hey, this is not right. But don't be like, stand up for yourself. Be able to communicate properly. And that's what I got from her.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful to have my grandmother still alive and to be here for her great grands.
Yeah. It's a beautiful thing. She's a beautiful woman. The next picture, I think, is your nephew, I think.
Yes. So I was thinking about this because I'm like, I've always had, since a child, a boy and a girl cousin in my life, or a nephew in my life, around the same ages. So it was meant for me to have a boy and a girl, and they're at a young age. So this is my nephew, Poppy. I won't call his real name out, but I do love my Poppy. I'm always there for him. We was actually when I left Florida, it was the hardest thing ever because at that time, Poppy and his older brother was living with me at the time, and I loved it. So I'm just in homage that like they're getting so old a bit, but I do have my babies now to raise. So
Keep living, sis. Keep living.
yes, yes.
That's all I can say. Keep living.
I can't hold them like that.
Early on, just like the over hypeness sometimes, and not when I say overhype of the coronavirus, I'm not saying that it's not real, but I'm like, I think people have done some overblown responses to it. And I remember early on in the HIV epidemic, like people were afraid to touch people who were living with HIV. And and touch is something that we need as human beings. Like
Yes.
we have to be touched. Like touching feels good. And I remember, and this really wasn't that long ago when we adopted our son. He was about 8 years old. And this was before we knew the science behind U equals U. And as a person living with HIV, you hold a responsibility, or you feel like you hold a responsibility for everybody else around you sometimes. But we were at this park, and Maurice had gone down on this skateboard thing, and he ran into this little boy, and he fell back and hit his head. So he's bleeding. He's got an open wound. And I'm like, oh my God. And it was one of those things like, do I touch my son to help him because I have HIV and God forbid something happens? It's one of those things where you don't even want to touch people even when they need your help. So seeing these pictures of you and your grandma being close, you and your nephew being close, there's something about that closeness that I think sometimes we lose once we, hear our diagnosis.
That is true. One of the things I have not experienced it in my immediate family, but I have experienced it before. And I recall like my closest friend, just me and him, because we are in a support group and we are growing up together, him being raised by his grandmother, and he had his own plate, his own spoon, his own cup. They would bleach behind him. And this is a kid like my nephew age, and I was the same age as him too. And I just remember like hearing his story and just wanting to go home and just hug my grandmother, or hug my nephews and my nieces, and just let them know I love them, because I'm not treated that way at home. I'm not. Now I may be getting bullied in other ways, but it wasn't related to HIV, and that was truly a blessing for me to just be able to experience the love and the comfort from my family. There was other dysfunctions going on, but at the same token, that's just life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sadly, that's still happening. I had a patient just last year who was diagnosed, and his family kind of kept him upstairs in the bedroom, gave him his own refrigerator, could be around the kids until they knew he was virally suppressed. Just a bunch of ignorance and foolishness. So I want to segue into a happier part. So, like early in the early days of HIV, they didn't even want us having sex, much less thinking about having a baby. Like as a woman who's HIV positive, a lot of back in the day, having a baby was something they just suggested that you didn't do. I love this photo here because it kind of like it has a wider depth of field, so you can see it like your fingers, and you see the sonogram, and you had a baby. You had 2 babies, and that's just something that, again, back in the day, it just wasn't something we suggest. Now women who are HIV positive can have babies just like everybody else who are perfectly negative. Tell me about, your feelings about becoming a mother and how you process that.
I had mixed emotions, only because the first person I shared it with was a relative, and her response was that, how can you do that, and your mom put you through that, and how dare you want to bring a baby into this world and you're HIV positive. So her reaction and her like immediate reaction, you were the first person to know.
Right.
So it was like, wow, like seriously, what am I doing? So it kind of confused me in a sense to where I'm like, oh no, this is what's going to happen. But immediately I had to draw back and say, are you serious? Do you not know who I am? Like, have you not seen the work that I've done in this community? Like, I popped back at her. I had that doubt. I did have the doubt, but I popped back at her so fast because I'm like, I'm undetectable for one. For two, I take my medicine like I'm supposed to. I know the responsibility and what I'm getting myself into. So how dare you sit here and say that? Like, I'm not our mother, like, at the same token. So that, to me, it gave me strength, and it gave me the confidence to say, okay, I may have to do this alone because of the choice, the sperm donor choice I made. But at the same token, I'm going to do this and I'm going to be the best mother ever. And my baby is going to be negative, and she is. And my son came 11 months after that, and he's negative. So
Right.
my children's father is negative, the same father, same father. But at the same token, I'm like, just the stigma that was involved. And
Yeah.
then even the process of going to the doctors, because someone who's HIV positive have to go to the doctors more than someone who's not. It's called the high risk pregnancy. So, of course, there are things that we have to monitor. There are things we have to do. And just as any mom or any responsibility we have to, especially with the life inside of me, the life that was inside of me, I took that responsibility like as my top priority. So
Right.
I did everything I could.
So the next photo is that life inside of you, and I love this picture because of the shading of it. Is there's this light that's coming in from the side, and like you're glowing all at the same time. Like, so I know you said it was a high risk pregnancy, so you had to go a lot more often. But I mean, this picture just looks like you're just in a really, really happy place right here.
I was, because just to be able to like experience a life inside of you, like they're kicking, is really, this is really about to happen. And the nerves kicking, because it's one thing to be an auntie and a cousin, because those babies can go back to their mom. It's another thing knowing that this is going to be my full responsibility, like a full-time job, and knowing the excitement and just knowing that I'm ready for this. Like my whole life has been around children. My whole life has been loving and caring for kids. That was mine or was not mine. Like I would have all the neighborhood kids. I am Tara, the babysitter. So it's like I always had children around me. So I was preparing for that moment that I thought would not happen at one point in time, because the doctors told me, you cannot have kids. You cannot do this. You cannot do that. So now being able to define the odds and say this is possible, it's possible. And the lessons I was sharing as a peer educator and as like a spokesperson going to the school systems, letting the kids know that anything is possible as long as you put your mind to it and do the positive things, that the necessary things that needs to be in place. Like
Right.
there is what we call sperm washing for someone who's HIV positive. A male who's HIV positive can take his sperm and get it washed. There is artificial insemination. There are so many different resources for us to maintain, like to be a father, to be a mother. So these resources are out there. We just have to access them. And then it also entwines with research, knowing that these things are there because research presents itself to show the facts, to show what's really going on. So I was just, I was excited to be a mother.
It looks like it too. I don't know. Definitely got my. We're gonna skip the next pick and go to the last pick, and then we'll come back because I want to wish Shanice a happy birthday. But a lot of photographers start shooting like in auto mode, and this is one of those things where you've mastered your camera. You're shooting in manual, you're shooting raw, you're doing all the things that professional photographers do, and then you end up capturing these beautiful pictures right here. No, for some of us, I was an ugly kid. Like I know I was an ugly kid. I was really, really, really weird looking, and with big ears, and like so you kind of have these things about self doubt. But this picture right here, when I saw it, I was like, oh, I'm using this one. Like this is the one that I saw. And I'm like, yes, this is everything. At least for this day, everything is together. Everything's a 10 on this. Tell me about, how did you get to that point? And these are also, they're not destinations, they're like processes. Because sometimes we don't feel pretty. But like this picture right here is so freaking gorgeous. Like tell me about the feelings that you get when you see this.
Well, this is the moment where I said I want to be married. Like regardless of all the rejection, regardless of like the people who like walked out on me, regardless of it, I'm going to be someone's wife one day, and I'm
Right.
going to be the best wife ever. So let me prepare. So the ring I have on is actually, and the earrings are my grandmother's. So the dress, I had seen it at a thrift store, but it is a beautiful, like a beautiful dress. And I'm like, one day I'm going to be a bride. So let me take a bride shot. I just want to see, like, how would this be? Like, and just preparing myself so that when he do finds me, and yes, sooner than later, um, I will be ready. Well, I am ready. I
There
am
you go.
ready at that moment. At this moment, I was ready because I would say I did have someone in my life that was willing to accept all of me, but because I was not in that place of accepting myself, I rejected what could have been.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
now I'm at a place there where I'm like, I'm ready. I am ready.
This is a beautiful shot. Beautiful. Quintara, thank you so much. Before we go, I want to, before we move on, I want to wish, who's this little lady right here?
That is Takara, my niece. She's named after me. I always say that. Quintara Takara. She is 15 years old today, and I just want to wish her a happy birthday. And I love you dearly, Takara. Look behind Sean. You know who Sean is. He's wishing you happy birthday, and we just love you. And one of the things I wanted to do, because with Takara and my nieces and my nephews, they was the ones who was helping me advocate. When I needed someone to go out in the streets and to put on a shirt or to pass out condoms, they was there with me. They was my street team. And I appreciated them so much for just being willing and even allowing their moms to say, why you got my kid out here passing out condoms? Because one day they're going to need these condoms. And so just allowing me to educate them and just being an inspiration to them. And I love them so much. Sakara, I love you. And happy birthday, baby.
I don't even know you.
Yes.
So now we're going to move into Mr. Sean Black. We're going to bring him up on the screen. So, Sean, these pictures are absolutely gorgeous. Like, I just love them. And before we talk about your pictures, I want to talk a little bit about you. Tell the people a little about you and your journey and your work, because you've done some beautiful work. You're muted.
Okay, there we go. Thank you so much, Tony. And first of all, I wanted to say thank you to Southern AIDS Coalition and my beautiful friends, Quintara and Arya, who just can say it so well and really bring a thoughtful, so much into their stories, and really, I think, let people into their lives as they've done with me. So I am, I'm very blessed to have them in my life. So the pictures that we're looking at, so my journey in activism actually, started when I came out at, 17, and my friends that I, finally having gay friends and going to gay clubs, they all started becoming sick, and, I felt really robbed, and but I was happy to be there, plan funerals and clean out closets, because the early days were so heartbreaking. I was, I remember being gowned up with in the, at that time when we weren't allowed into the rooms without, being protected, although that, went away quickly.
No science behind that at all, just the overblown response to something, to ignorance.
Yeah, no, and it was just a very frightening, cold time, uncaring in our history. And so, and I was not, became positive later. And at the same time I was diagnosed, I actually came into this opportunity through a mentor of mine who worked for ANU, America's AIDS magazine. And I'm very grateful, to them for the opportunities. And that's how I got to meet Quintara. And that's where I got to meet Arya. My father was a veteran press photographer, and that's where I get my passion. And he was, particularly interested in capturing beauty and in portraiture. And so in my role there for a decade, in which I was afforded tremendous opportunities, meeting both, getting to do celebrity photography and portraiture, as well as working with the advocates. And I do believe that, it's important for us to chronicle, because just as we sat in the beginning of this discussion, and the memorial that we saw, and God rest Mary Bowman. I really loved that young lady, and she was very, very talented. And I was fortunate to photograph her and other people that were mentioned. That it's sad that they've passed, but it's nice to reflect on in their images, and that soul that we can see in some of these pictures. I love you too, Davina. So I'm grateful for that role. I definitely don't like being in the spotlight, although people would probably argue that. But I do see the power of photography, and I do know people like Quintara and Arya and Ariana and Davina and Vicky Lynn and the others that I've seen that have chimed in here that are joining us, and so many other advocates, that put everything out there. So honestly, they taught me, to be open about my status. I currently am a full-time lecturer now at the University of Miami, where, they've got a tremendous medical program here. And Quintara talked about being, affiliated, and that's where, with the pediatrics division of infectious disease. And, I've done several studies here and participated in studies, and I ended up getting a Master's of Fine Art degree here in this journey. And so, I'm grateful to be at a university where I can be open about my HIV status with my students, young people, because, with my role at the magazine, the work that we do as advocates, we all are well acquainted and the work that we do. So in order for us to have impact, we have to project and amplify that, outside of our own community, because we can be a bubble, and and it's wonderful. It gives us a lot of support. But I think if we're going to help, here in the Deep South with the numbers of HIV rates of infection, particularly amongst, women and of color and trans women, women of trans experience of color, it's, we really want to, end this epidemic. And so I think visibility, telling our stories, it's critical.
Right. Right. And nothing tells a story like a picture. I mean, like, I'm a photographer too, and I'm probably the world's worst photographer when it comes to doing business, because I like taking pictures so much that sometimes I take them for free. And just because of the stories that you get to tell in the archival, properties of what we do now, it's just a beautiful thing. Do we have some more images? Because we're going to go through a couple more images, and then we're going to open up for questions. So tell me about this one.
Well, this image is actually a very personal image to me, which I was grateful to see that it was selected in the images. And this gentleman's name is Carlos. And this was, a lover. And I was able to photograph him, a very masculine gentleman, but, also a very caring and gentle man. And so I really liked this image. I mean, there's a lot more to this. It's, it's exposing a lot, but, I think it's important to talk about our humanity, and to be sex positive. And it is something that we realize that, okay, you're hiding, the pleasures of our sexual beings is, detrimental to our health. So if we can, normalize and talk more freely about our sexuality, and I think it's a healthier thing to do. But light quality is really important to me, and I certainly like hard contrast. I like hard light, hard natural light. So the side lighting I think is really important. I think it's revealing, yet it's not completely revealing.
Right. Next slide.
This is Adam Rippon, the Olympic champion, and I was lucky to get a chance to photograph him right before he went on Dancing with the Stars and kind of really was popular. And I saw this young man, his amazing talent, as a really great representative of the the LGBTQ community. And it was an honor to get to photograph him. He's actually wearing Victor Luna, who is a HIV positive fashion designer and a friend of mine who's helped me out numerous times in donating and coming to my rescue with beautiful couture fashions that he designs. And so and I had Victor with me that day, as well as Bruce Valanche came, and I think he's going to be one of the next pictures I saw in the queue. This young person is a celebrity's son and or daughter. And, I think gender fluid, and I don't want to say too much, but, I think as an educator of, 18, 19, 20-year-olds in both now currently, and, in schools that are, have privilege or, affluence, and also teaching at schools that didn't have, in schools in more urban, poor areas. I really like to capture and document young people. I do believe, their compassion and what I'm seeing in new generations coming. And it was mentioned even in the DNC, discussions that were amazing last night and the last several days. But I think, documenting and chronicling the lives of gender fluid individuals and individuals willing to let their, guard down and to be revealed. There's a power in that. And of course, this is very alluring, and certainly Jade draws you in. And it was at Gilles Marini's house, actually, that I photographed. And there was a rose bush, and I just pulled the rose out, snapped it off of the branch and put it behind Jade's ear. Because
if you made this black and white, it looked like one of those Calvin Klein ads from the 80s.
Yeah, no, and I love the Jade's freckles.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I think it would be nice in black and white. I agree with you, Tony.
We're gonna do one more. I think the last picture I want to see, the one with MJ Rodriguez. Is that the last one? Let's see here. Yes.
And again, MJ is wearing a Victor Luna gown that he brought us that day, and I actually was able to meet MJ at one of Cheryl Lee Ralph's Divas Simply Singing events. So in my role with the magazine, I was able to go to these events and these galas, as well as working within the stars on the ground in the grassroots advocacy arena. And but the focus is try to bring in these stars to help amplify the messages of the stories that we're trying to tell and the lives that we're trying to uplift.
Right.
And MJ was extremely gracious with her time and just, everything you see of her in her role on Pose, that mother protector, that graceful, Quintara, hands down, is probably one of the most graceful women I've ever known. So I have to say, Quintara, no one beats you, my little sister. But MJ is certainly, a class act, and and we need the celebrities to help amplify the voices outside of that bubble that we're in, and their target audience, young gay people, and or queer or gender fluid, young trans people of color. It's there's so much information that that a celebrity can disseminate in their social media channels.
Yeah,
and we need that.
I think I love the fact that we can use celebrities to give us that like 30,000 foot level view where everybody can see it. But it takes people like Arya, Quintara, yourself, even me, being able to tell our stories and come forth. I want to, we got like 15 more minutes before this is over, and Daphne's going through these pictures. I want to let people know that if you're watching, that you can put questions in the comments on Facebook. We're seeing all the comments on Facebook. So if you have any questions for any of the guests, put them in there, and I'll try to get to them. I want to ask some like pertinent questions. So like right now, so I'm going to start with Arya. Like right now, we're at such a like a tipping point in our culture, in our society. And I intentionally did you first, because whenever I do things now, I always start with the people who are most marginalized. And being a Black woman of trans experience, no matter how you look at privilege, you're always the person who's most marginalized. So like as a Black trans woman, we have the Black Lives Matter thing. We have all this bullcrap with politics. How are you navigating that? Like, you know, how do you bring your whole self into the picture? Because as Black queer people, we're ostracized not just by the races, but sometimes Black people get on our nerves too, and we have to get them off, like I do on a daily basis. So how are you managing that space right now?
It's not easy. I can say that. You know, just recently we had 3 trans women in Hollywood, California, who got attacked by men of color, black and brown men. And so when it comes to Black Lives Matter, you know, it does matter, but the movement as generally does not include trans individuals within the narratives and the publicities and the stories. So as a member of the trans community, I think it's important for us to just take control of our own narratives and our own stories. We're finally coming to a place to where, you know, we have celebrities, we have public platforms, we have push and pull and power, and it's really coming together to kind of create our own movement that is based on demands, you know, and based off of actionable items that people can do. You know, don't just support us, don't just use the hashtag, you know, use your money, use your privilege, use your power, and push continuously to try to, like, because what you said, we're the lead, we're at the bottom, we're the bottom rung, and if you attain to capture systems that work for us,
Oh my God, yeah. We center the majority too much in everything that we do. You know, a lot of people just don't realize that the Black Lives Matter movement was started by queer women. Like, we've been left out of something we create, but as Black people, we get left out of stuff we create all the time. Like, we create stuff, then next thing you know, you got Miley Cyrus twerking. You know, so we deal with that type of nonsense every day. Quintara, my sister, I have loved talking to you. Like, I want to bring you on my podcast to even delve a little deeper into your story, because, you know, I again, like I said earlier, I understand why people don't automatically just tell their kids they live with HIV, because it means that they have to tell them something about themselves sometimes, and sometimes not. But what is your advice to, like, people who are HIV positive with kids who are positive, who have not disclosed to them yet? I had a situation where one of my good friends had a brother who was born positive, didn't know he was positive. Once he found out, he literally started to sabotage himself. He wouldn't take medications, and unfortunately, he passed away. And that is a very common story that people who don't work in our industry, they don't know that. Because as a child, you know, you have those developmental years, and you built up in your mind who you are. And then all of a sudden you get this, well, you're also HIV positive. I didn't ask for that. Like, what? So what's your advice to parents who are struggling with that?
So for one, I would say to, before you disclose, make sure you have a support system in place for your child and for yourself. Because once you disclose, you don't want to just leave them out there to just the wolves. At the end of the day, you want to make sure that they are supported, that they are loved, and they are encouraged to just continue being themselves. But just know that diagnosis does not define who they are. One of the things that I took, well, people ask me, well, are you going to tell your kids? Are you going to tell your kids? My kids, I thought, were too young to know. But the more I'm in this field and the more they come with me to different things and the way they see me take my medication, they ask questions. So I had to explain to them in their language. So don't always, as parents, feel as though your kid is not going to understand. Go in their language and make sure they are, again, supported and loved. Love is the key. Because once you love your child and your child understands that love is there, that support is there, and that support is key as well, the sky is the limit.
You know, it goes back to things that we normalize. Like, when you normalize things, you automatically reduce stigma. Like, you know, even all this in the epidemic stuff that we're getting, you know, it's like nobody's really asking us, like, what can we do to help the rest of y'all out? You know, because as a sometimes straight presenting cisgender gay man, you know, as a woman of trans experience, as a cisgender straight woman, like, we move in different spaces all the time. Sometimes we move in them concurrently. If you were to, and I'm going back to Arya, if you were to give like the people who are trying to tell us what to do to end the epidemic, advice on what we need to do, what would be one of the things you telling them they need to do?
First off, I would like to just point out that there's too many people who are not HIV positive or living with HIV or greatly affected by it that are in control as to what is implemented for ending the epidemic and employed by the CDC and NIH. And we need more of us in places of power to actually do what works for us, because we already know it. The solution's there. It's just that the solution makers aren't in the right places, because people are taking over our narratives, taking over our stories, taking over our funding. And that's, I think, the crux of what really
Amen, my
needs to be
sister.
fixed
Quintara,
about
same
this.
question.
She put the nail on the hammer. I mean, the hammer on the nail, that analogy, because there is in place, like, we are disproportionalized where we're not being heard because we're not in position to be heard. So at the end of the day, I do feel as though if there are more inclusive of, like, someone who's HIV positive, someone who is like an advocate, someone who knows policies and procedures, to all come and collaborate together for a collective cause and not for their own individual purpose, then I do feel we can go much further. Part of the narrative I've seen with being in the HIV field and attending, like, different groups, was that everyone had their own individual purpose. But if we realize we're there for a collective, collective reasoning, a collective resolution, then we can, like, resolve issues. We can resolve poverty. We can resolve homelessness. We can resolve, like, the violence that are occurring, because we're coming as collective with united, not with our own individual plans. So I think we all have to get in the same mind frame and just be able to move forward.
I like what Arya said earlier about, if you create things for us, it fits everybody else. Again, that whole thing with like the focus being shifted. Arya, tell me, like some of the things that you're doing that's coming up that people may want to know about.
Well, my organization, we have a rapid response fund that's soon forthcoming for Black and Brown communities, specifically TTNC communities affected by HIV. That's one thing during COVID-19, where we're not really looking at those specifics, and really, like you said, really looking at who's the most greatly affected right now is people who live with HIV, who are also Black, who are also women, who are also trans. And so looking at all of those intersections and just tackling that first, as well as just injecting leadership, toolkits, capacity building, and structure for our grassroots organizations, and making sure that they have the tools needed to have good finance and budgeting and HR and systems and reporting, so that we come into this work with a passion, and sometimes we're playing catch up with what needs to be in place to actually build a foundation for us to work off of. So my organization
Quintara,
is
same
around
question.
the country.
I love it. So right now I am preparing for homeschool. Yes, that is first. I have my kindergarten. My son, he will be in kindergarten this year, so it's a big transition for him. And my daughter, who is going to be in first grade, all of it is virtual. Once they get settled, then mommy going back to virtual because I'm also still in school. So, but I don't start until October. They start in August, next week actually. So that's first and foremost. So once I get that set up, I have started Hollow Warrior, which is a year and 3 days launch. And that's mostly geared to, like, my faith-based community. To just be able to, like, connect with individuals, to be able to transfer their way of thinking, and to be able to live positively, to be able to live fearlessly in their lives, and just be able to heal from whatever pain and turmoil they have been through. So I'm working on that as well. I definitely going to reach out to Arya because I'm in that strategy planning part where I need to progress further. So I love, again, the collaborations of things we can do together.
So one last question. We got about 5 minutes. So Alfonso Mills, the great, my friend, my brother, Alfonso Mills says, what do each of you do to elevate your stories and get them out into the community? And Sean, I'm going to start with you, and then we'll go back around.
Okay.
Well, I think what I try to do is I try to make pictures and I try to document my community as gracefully and with as much dignity as possible. You know, I'm scrappy. I have a business background, and so I'm not necessarily the best person on the front lines for things. I'm kind of a good behind the scenes, but I do love to capture the beauty that I see in our community, and I think that's what's important. You know, to really to showcase the good in us, and I my heart aches when I see like that video in Hollywood of the 3 trans women that were attacked, and you know that laughing of the person recording it, and just it was so sickening to actually I had to stop it. But you know, and Elizabeth Warren, I believe, said last night too, it's like we've got to better realize our higher ideals. We have to come together. This whole time with COVID-19 is so stressful. The tensions are immense, the domestic violence, trans violence. So, you know, I think as much as I can showcase the good in our community and the humanity, you know, and then also, you know, our President Obama said it best last night too in his speech about our democracy's at stake, and we need to vote for people that will protect us, that will uplift us, that will make sure that our protections are kept in place. And I think that's critical. So, you know, in Elevate, and I'm going to want to document as well as participate in the voting process, you know, this year, and really try to protect our democracy.
Cool. Quintara?
Okay, so as for me, like I want to define community because some people may think that, hey, community is like your neighborhood, but community to me is where you live, sleep, work, play, everywhere. So with my involvement with my community, because I am heavily involved with my church, which is Potomac Valley Church of Christ, I'm just like in reference to connecting with each of the members and connecting with my neighbors, having these small family groups and accountability partners, so where we can have these conversations and that we can be able to, where I can address certain things that related to HIV and bring forth new I want to say it, new I'm lost for words. New ideas, not so much as new ideas, because the ideas are there. So it's just creating something that somebody else is not doing, or creating a new norm for what they may consider like, oh, let's not talk about this. No, let's talk about this. So creating those ideas to where we are able to have conversations, whether I'm at church, whether I'm in a community, I recently left testing. I was working for AIDS response effort in Winchester, Virginia, where I was the HIV tester there. I was in the jails where I go, and I still continue to go, and well, not during this time in COVID, but I was going there, just being able to present my story and to do HIV 101s. In a methadone clinic as well with HIV 101s, and just educating the people wherever I go, wherever I'm at, and just being able to pick their brain and how much they know about HIV. And if they need condoms, I have them on hand so that I can provide them with safer sex. So I have my condom package that I pass out to my neighbors' sons, and just be able to say, hey, stay safe. I may not have to disclose my status verbatim, but I am going to provide you with the tools and the education.
Okay. Arya, what are you doing to elevate your story?
Real quick, I just want to tell everyone to prioritize your comfort. Realize that you don't have to say yes to every opportunity, and you have to be picky and choosy when it comes to telling your story and what platform you choose to tell it at. Because I think that once you create that comfort, when it's a space and a platform that you really feel something with, and you feel something with the facilitators and with the fellow participants like this is, it just naturally your story will greatly affect more people within that environment. So I don't think we prioritize our comfort enough as activists and advocates, and I think that that's something that we need to really uplift and look at, because you can't just go for every paycheck or every opportunity, because you're more than just that. I'm more than just being trans. I'm more than just being HIV positive, and you find those more things that really identify you and connect you to other people when you prioritize your comfort.
Man, go ahead, Sean.
And I just wanted to say, in response to Alfonso's question as well, I think the programming that has been on Southern AIDS Coalition's site recently, last week they had a panel with Justine Ingram and Zarion Newbell and beautiful 2Ls, Divine and Tiffany Starr, and just getting to hear these women and their stories, and it's regular people working long, hard years in this fight and struggle and being visible and being open and being vulnerable. I was so impressed with that panel discussion, and, encourages me to try to get more connected with my community. And, it's difficult. We're trying to work, and these times are financially difficult. And for many, it's way worse than.
Yeah, it is.
And so, I just wanted to say that I think Southern AIDS Coalition here, not to, be gratuitous, but really is like Quintara used, hitting the nail right on the head with the hammer. So.
Well, look, I'm gonna tell y'all, I think my community has gotten bigger today. I loved having this conversation with y'all. We are so thankful for your truth, for your transparency, for your strength. A lot of times people think that, somehow or another we're not as good as, or we're weaker than. We are absolutely amazing people. You guys definitely are. I'm so glad that they asked me to host this. This is just starting my day off in a way that you just don't even understand. I'm gonna hit you up later. That's something I need to talk to you about. But y'all, for those of you who are watching, please watch the Southern AIDS Coalition's Facebook page. They got more programming going on today. They got another whole day going on tomorrow. If you have any questions, hit us up in the chat box. You can actually, inbox me. I'm very transparent about all of my stuff. And again, thank you to Daphina, everybody at Southern AIDS Coalition, all their sponsors, and especially you guys, just for being the wonderful people that you are. I love doing this. It's been awesome. Thank y'all so much.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.